Welcome to the Machlokes podcast. This is class number 13 in the discourse called Machlokes 5672, which is the sixth discourse in the overall book B'Shosh Dimu 5672. This is going to be the second class in chapter 24. Last class started as chapter 23, the last class in chapter 23, and we went into chapter 24. This is going to be the second class in chapter 70 and chapter 24 in the overall book. Okay, so yesterday we left off with a question. He asked a question. What's the question? The overall idea that he's been developing over here is how the oros, the lights of the spherotes, develop. How they develop and they become facilitatable into vessels. And as we discussed, that there is a process of differentiation. In other words, the general light that contains a specific hidden potential of 10 powers, that's why they're called 10 spheres agnuzois, now become more specified. Each power becomes more expressed. The light separates to become more of an individual light. By doing that, first of all, the mere fact that it's becoming revealed is already weakening. Every revelation is already a weakening of the energy, as we discussed in the earlier classes. And especially when something is becoming when you're particularizing something from a general potential, that energy is much, much less. And the example he gave was how you take a word or a letter, which is part of once of a word, especially if that word was part of a larger sentence, and especially if that larger sentence was part of a larger paragraph, especially if that larger paragraph was part of a larger chapter, and especially if that larger chapter was part of one book, which that entire book is expressing one idea. So when you have this massive idea, and this letter was kind of lost as being part of the infrastructure facilitating the kind of the container holding this massive idea. And then when you take that one letter and you separate it, there is suddenly an enormous reduction in the content of that letter, although it's the exact same letter that was in the source. That was the idea we were learning. And this is kind of the idea how when you're differentiating a general potential of Ein Sof for 10 spherot, and then it becomes specified to one sphera, a potential, so to speak, and a power of the Ein Sof to emanate one element, you've lost so much of the richer content that was once in this element of it. But he asked a question yesterday. He says, this all makes so much sense if the 10 hidden spheros would be the root of vessels. And then we would be using the example of letters, because letters are containers. When you break away one piece of the container, you're left with only a tiny little bit of the juice that was flowing in the container. A very, very inferior element of that juice, of that light, a very inferior element of that light remains in this particular one letter, but only a tiny fraction of a fraction. That's if we're dealing with the larger and more infinite light will go away if you have a more minuscule vessel. Where the vessel, the container, is tiny. And is tiny. So then, a lot of opinion of the Holy Ari. And the Ari is the one who says that the 10 hidden spheros that we are now differentiating is the light itself. So what does it mean? When you break away one piece of the light, it's not, in a sense, it's not even peaceable. Okay, you say, before it differentiated, the light was a potential for 10 spheros. And now you're highlighting one sphera, but it's the same Ein Sof. There's no difference in the Ein Sof. It's not like light that if you're dealing with two things, there's a light that's going in the vessel. So the question is the container. When the container is part of a larger container, there is much more that can reside in it. Taking away a little piece of the container, maybe you'll have a little juice, a little light, a little bit of the inner content, but much less, and of an inferior quality of what was before. I understand that. But here, we're not removing away a piece of a container. You're taking the light and expressing it as one power, fine. But then when you're saying that the general light goes away, what's going away? This is the light itself. It's not a container that's facilitating the light. So that's where he's having a hard time over here, or not having a hard time. That's what he's challenging himself with. Now he's going to offer two answers, and the answers are very, very close one to each other. But you have to, it's obviously subtle. Everything is subtle over here. Let's see if we can understand and appreciate the answer that he's going to say. He's going to explain that even though light is indivisible, like the light itself is indivisible, and even if, again, as we're saying, the dividing of the light means you're expressing one potential of the overall light, the light to create chachma. But in essence, the light, it's light. It's all a simple light, and therefore, in a sense, it's still indivisible. Yet, in light itself, even when there is no vessels and containers, in which you can say that there was the air went away, the light went away when you broke a piece off of these vessels, right? When you take away one letter. So we're dealing just with light. But even in light, in other words, what's this question? This question is the light is indivisible. There's no levels in light. In a container, you can say what is residing in the container, but the light is all one light. What do you mean? What's going away when you're kind of separating the light? What's going away? It's all light. It's indivisible. The answer is no. That even in an indivisible light, there is a divisibility. What does that mean? There is the pnimius of the light, and there is the chitzonius of the light, which means the inner element of it and the external element. Let's take, for instance, the body and soul. So our body is considered a vessel. Our soul is considered energy, is considered light or energy. So, of course, we differentiated that the different limbs of the body, they can facilitate different powers of the soul. Smaller limbs, less sophisticated limbs, less sophisticated organs can feature only a lower part of the soul. That's one thing. But then when you have one particular power, let's say you have the power of movement, the power to throw something. So the power to throw, in addition to the physical hand, the real power is a soul power. But we understand that sometimes the hand is being lazy, and it's throwing something, but it's throwing it from the external power. Sometimes the hand knows that it's throwing right now the pitch of your career. This is the pitch in the World Series, in the ninth inning of the seventh game. Okay, so then the pitcher is concentrating all of his energy and all of his power, the entire pnimius hakoach, the innermost of that power, of the power of throwing. He wants to throw a pitch at enormous force with incredible precision. So the entire pnimius of the koach is now activated. Same is also in study and learning, let's say, the intelligence. Sometimes we learn things and our intelligence, we're talking about the intellect, the pure light of the seichel. Sometimes it's an external power of our intelligence. Sometimes when we toil and we're really, really, really desperate to understand something, then we're infusing it into the pnimius of that light. So you can see how in light itself, there's chitzonius of the light and the pnimius of the light, which means the external element of the light and the internal level of the light. And therefore, what we're saying is as follows. Before the light directs itself in one direction. When the light is not yet taking on a particular expression, and the light is still general light, so then the pnimius of the light can manifest. The inner dimension of the light is more present. But when the light tilts itself in one particular direction, then what flows into that particular direction? The chitzoni is the external of the light. So even if we're not talking about a vessel, which is something other, which is a substance other than the light, there's vessels and light, where it's easier to say the content that's flowing in it is less when it becomes separated from the overall bigger vessel. And it's easier to say it. Now, when we're talking about an indivisible light, it's harder to say it. But even in that indivisibility, we can understand that there is the internal of it and the external of it. And the internal light yeah, I'm in the middle of. And the internal light, maybe in 20 minutes. And the internal light is expressed when the light is remaining in a general state. But when the light is taking on a particularization, then it's the very same light, but a more external aspect of that light is now a less potent element of the light, a less at a lesser degree. That's the idea. So let's read it inside. Inyanu, the idea is, this is in chapter 24. Inyanu, the idea is like 5-6 lines in. And you do it is known, the ba'or yesh pnimis v'chitzonius. In light, there is the internal and there's the external. Aymashi is bar lekamon Perek kuf chav beis. Look at what it says later in chapter 122. That's why I looked it up. Over there, he's talking about in Keser itself, which Keser is really light without vessels. Especially compared to Atzilus, where Atzilus there's real vessels, Keser is still just pure light. So even in Keser itself, where it's just energy, there is the chitzonius of the light and the internal element. Like we know, Erech Anpin is considered the external of Keser, and Atik Yom and Pnimius of Keser. You see that in light itself. And he uses very nice description over there that we say, I never thought of this. Obviously, I didn't think of most of the things he's talking about. Hoid v'hadar lavashta. That God, you enclosed yourself in glory. Hoid is glory. V'hadar, and in splendor. So he explains the difference between glory and splendor. And splendor is that glory is, both of them are light, are an illumination. But glory is the internal part of the light, the essence of the light. And splendor is a more external element of light. And that's why, and he brings that Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, God gave him Hod. Karnei Hod, gave him the rays of Hod. Hashem gave on to Moshe Rabbeinu the Hod. To Joshua, to Yeshua, Hashem gave him Hadar. It says by him, by Yeshua, it says a word, Hadar lo. So we say also in Deres V'Amunah, we say Hod v'Hadar. So Hod is a more internal element of a light. Hadar is the light when it's coming out more to expression. And everything when it comes out to expression is more external. So Moshe, the Midrash says, to Moshe he gave the Hod, and to Yeshua only got the Hadar. So that's the difference between Pnimis. And he goes to a very nice explanation there, but we'll leave it when we get to chapter 20 to 122. I guess in a few years from now. And the same is over here. Yeah, it's actually 99 chapters away. We're not that far. And the same is also so just like it is in oir, in light itself, on the lower levels of light, there is the chitzonius of the light and the pnimius of the light. So even though now we're not talking about lights, we're talking about the root of light in the oir itself before the tzimtzum. This is still the shirish. There's also the internal and the external. Over here you have to emphasize even more a lack of levels, because over here everything is pashut, it's simple, and since you're dealing over here with utter simplicity, it's much harder to see and to speak of external and internal. It's all one. It's all a simple light. Yet even over here, he says, everything that there is going to be in the manifest, in the revealed, yesh gam kein b'shorish. Everything in the manifest. So if in the manifest levels, when eventually these lights come out, in the light itself, there's the external and the internal. So we have to say that is in the quintessential beginning as well. There is obviously on a so much of a higher level, but the concept exists over there. Stated elsewhere. And since in the revealed light, let's say the lights of Atzilus, the lights that go into vessels, there is the internal, the pnimius or the internal of the light, the essence of the light, and there is the chitzonius of the or the external of the light. Like we see in our own powers, as we discussed earlier, that you can throw something with your pnimius of your power of throwing, and you can throw something with the chitzonius. Any action that we do, any activity, that can be a more external projection and a more internal projection. So the same is also above. In the root of these lights is pnimius and therefore we can apply the concept as follows. When the light did not yet differentiate itself into chesed, into gevura, but the light was still one general power for 10 spheros, the spheres agnuzes. It was an or kloli, it was a general light. Then a much higher, deeper force of that light was shining, a much deeper brilliance of that light. The hoid of the light was shining, not just the hadar of the light. But once the light starts differentiating itself, then only the hadar, the splendor of the light, is there, but not the hoid, not the glory of the light. We're shining a much pnimi, and it's that or pnimi yoser, particularly this internal light, that the world couldn't tolerate. That's why Hashem has to, because that can't come into vessels, and that's why Hashem has to reduce the light and differentiate the spheros, each one separately, so it would be a much lesser light, and then chitzonius of the light that's more tolerable by the vessels. And so that's one explanation. Where in the light itself, we're kind of finding a lessening that's possible in this process of differentiation, where the light is in a sense dimming when it's being differentiated, and it's sharper and stronger when before the light is differentiating itself, or particularizing itself, but remaining in the general. Now he's going to say, really, he's going to do a surgical procedure over here. And he's going to say that, of course, it was more gishmaker, meaning it was more understandable. The idea that when you break away a piece, you lose the general power was more relatable and appreciatable when we said that when we're talking about vessels, containers, because you're talking about two things over here. Then it makes more sense, right? Here we have to say that the same light, but it's dimming, it's stronger, it's weaker. So now he's going to find a method that even though we're talking about the lights, he's going to be able to it will be able to be understood similar to the vessels. Why? Because he's going to now discover a subtlety of a new idea. That there is a semi kind of a vessel, even in the naked lights. What do I mean by that? The vessels and the lights, they are two separate. They come from two separate powers in the Ein Sof, like we discussed. The light comes from the Or Ein Sof. The vessels come from the Tzimtzum. And from the Rishimu, like we discussed earlier. So these are like b'muhusam in their very substance. They're two separate entities. Now, however, he's going to give us over here that there is in light itself. There is something like vessels. It's not vessels yet. It's the in between that goes between the light and the vessels. And what is that? That's called garments. That light needs to first garb itself in the garment before it can go into a vessel. Similar to a concept that is explained, there is neshama, the soul. Then there is guf, which is body. And then there is every neshama has a lavush. The Alter Rebbe says in the second chapter of Tanya that every neshama has a lavush, has a garment. And that comes from the appearance, the lavush neshama. So what is that? Is that body? No, it's not body. Is that neshama? It's not neshama. It's a garment for the neshama. So it's like a vessel, but it's not a vessel. And therefore, where's he heading to? He's heading to that even the oiros on the highest levels, the light, and even the spheres agnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres that we're talking about, that are hidden in their source, are not just lights. They have, because if there are lights there, there's also levush. There's also the garments of these lights, which is already something separated from the light. However we can understand that. Okay, we're going to read it more. We're going to try to break it down more soon, but you get what I'm saying. And therefore, it's going to make now more sense that what? That before the light gets differentiates, let's say we're not going to divide light, pnimius or chitzonius of the light. Light is one light, not the external and internal. Let's not mess over there. Let's keep the light simple light. However, we do want to find the idea that there can be more light or less light manifesting when there is a certain togetherness. But we're not talking about vessels now. We're talking just about light. But now that we say that together with the lights, there are also the garments, the levushim of these lights, the garments of the lights. So now we can say like this. Before the lights differentiated, then the garments of those lights, each light differentiates with its own garment. But those garments, before they separated together with the light, those garments, those levushim were one levush, was one big garment. And if it was one big garment, it now can facilitate, because the garment is one garment, it can facilitate much more light. But as the light, even though the light, you might say, in it of itself is the same light that's differentiating, but since along with the light, as we said, tilting into one direction, it's now taking a levush, a garment, and now it's dressing itself in a particularized garment. And now let's say for the 10 hidden spheres, they become 10 garments. They're no more just one garment. That would be similar to the letters differentiating. The letters, instead of them standing together, making one word, each letter is going off to itself. The Beis goes off to itself. The Reish goes off to itself from the word Baruch. The Vav goes off to itself in the Chav. And when these letters differentiate, each one onto his own, have nothing compared to the power that they had when they formed the word blessing, when they formed the word Baruch. So what he basically did, he gave us over here in this explanation, he's giving us a keli, a vessel to the light. Even in the lights itself, there is an element of vessel. And that's where this diminishment is taking place. What's causing the diminishment is that the levushim, the garments now, are no more the same garment like they were before. And when they were before in a state of oneness, that garment can facilitate, as we say, much more light. And when that light begins to tilt itself, so from the level of the naked light itself, there wouldn't be a difference. It's still the same light. But since the garment that's coming along with it is now becoming a narrower garment, that's like a vessel, that's not the light, it's not the same substance as the light. Now you have much less container, and therefore the light too is dimming because the container. So it's different than the first explanation. In the first explanation, he was able to kind of come to terms that light itself dims itself, that there is a dimming, an essential dimming in the light itself without containers, by the light becoming specified. In the second explanation, you don't have to do that in the light. You can leave the light, the same light, and not touch the light, But then what is causing this dimming? What is causing this dilution? The diluting of the light, the diminishment of the light. It's not so much the light, but there is hidden vessels over there, but these vessels are not the vessels. The vessels are the garments that are always together with the light. And that garment is reduced. So let's read it inside, see if it makes sense over here. For another explanation is, in this Barlel, we explained earlier, Perek Tezayin, the Sharshei Oiroi Subchina Shem Avai. He said that the root of the lights, Kalim, we said, are the other seven. The roots of the vessels are the other seven names. Remember, we discussed the seven names of God. But Havaya has a name, Shem Havaya. The mere fact that we say that light has a name, means that there is a garment. He's now going to explain that name is always garment. Light itself can't have a name. Light is undefined. What do you mean? How are you labeling it? The moment you're labeling light is because it's already a garment. Even though we're not calling it's not vessels yet. Now, this idea that the light, that the name always related to any light is always connected to a lavush of the light. We know that when light fully manifests in vessels, the light is always, remember, we once said that the name Kael is in the vessel of Chesed. The name Elokim is in the vessel of Gvura. The name Shakai is in the vessel of Yesod. Right? We go through the various different names. But we explained that the light by all of them is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The light doesn't change because it's a simple light that runs through the Oires. Yet, there's a difference. Harei Noida. Even in this light, we know that that there is a change in each sphere. Why? Yesh chilukim ba'ashem Havaya. It's not like Havaya is the same in all the spheres because the light doesn't change. Something does change. Why? Because we know that the pronunciation of Havaya, the Nikudot, the vowelization, is different in each sphere. When the light is in Chachma, as he explains, b'ashem Havaya b'nikut ukamoy bekeser, when Shem Havaya is expressing the light, when we want to speak about the light of Keser, the infinite light of God as it is in Keser, and we're going to name it, and a name that is associated with that level is Havaya. But Havaya, what? Havaya with a nikudas of a kamatz. Shem Havaya benikit kamatz, with a nikudas of kamatz. Uba Chachma, when the light is now present in Chachma, much lower than Keser. Same light, but it's now in a lower state, in a lower vessel. Benikut patach. It has a different nikuda. It has a a sound, not a sound. And that's because kamatz, as your mouth is closed, represents a more concealed state. That the light is still closed. In Keser, it's still above. Chachma, it's beginning to open up to the world. It's beginning to reveal itself. Chachma is already a flash of revelation. That's why it's patach. Patach is you open your mouth. Like it says, Pia pascha b'chachma. Her mouth is opened up with chachma. Chachma is already an opening. Now, what is that? What was he saying? And that's not the kalim. The kalim are different names for each sphera. Kael is in chachma, for example, I think. Right? There's different names for each sphera. So what is the difference in the kudais? The difference in the kudais is really referring to something other than just the light. That's the lavush, that's the garment. And he's going to give another differentiation that you see applying to the light itself. How you can see that there is a lavush there. Gam, yesh b'chachma, for example, when Shem Havaya is applying to chachma, the gematria of Yud Kei Vav Kei, of the tetragrammaton of God's of Yud Kei Vav Kei, when you are is 72. What does that mean? Because you use different hidden letters. The inside of the letters are gematria 72, but when the light of Havaya is expressed in Bina, it's 63, and that is because the hidden letters, because when you spell a letter, Yud is Yud Vav Dalet. When you spell a letter, the inside letters are different. Miloy, if you fill Shem Havaya with Yuds, it's all Yuds, 4 Yuds, it's going to be 72. If you fill the God's name with Hayes, it's going to be Sag, 63. So what do you see? That there's changes from sphere to sphere. What's changing? It's the same. We're talking only about light. We're not talking about the vessels. Because then remember what we said earlier, the vessels have complete different names. What difference is there's different garments. That means that there is a medium. What he's basically saying is that there's an intermediary between the light and the vessel. And that's the garment. So that garment is in a sense like a subtle vessel. It's not a real vessel, but it's like a subtle vessel. 63. The Yedua is known that these names are garments. They garb the light. Like we explained, the neshama needs a garment for it to come down in a body. Through these names, the light is able to attach itself to the vessel. Now, remember earlier in the Maimer, a long time ago, we learned that the light, the names that there are regarding the vessels themselves, the names of the vessels, that is the divine energy that's in the vessel. Not relating to the light, not the light that vests itself in the vessel, but the light that creates the vessel itself. That's the name of Hashem that's in the vessel. But here we're talking about the name of the light. So the name of the lights themselves, they too have names and differentiations, and then they're all named Havaya. But there's differentiations in the Miloi, if it's 72, 63, or in the vowelization of it. This has to do with a hidden mediator over here, which is called a lavush. And he says that, and that lavush is the name. And based on this concept, we understand he's going to say that when these lavush, so where's he going? I have to stop over here. So we're going to continue this tomorrow in the next class, Bezrat Hashem. But where he's going is that because in the light itself, the light automatically comes with garments. It's applicable, the idea that we discussed earlier, that when although the light itself might not be indivisible, the same quality of light would always be if the light is present. But since the garment is now a richer garment, then because of that, there is less light. If it would only be the light itself, then it's light or not light. So if the light, what do you mean? It's getting less. What's getting less? But if there is now a vessel to hold it, and remember, even when we're dealing with Esespheres Agnuzos, according to the Arizal, that we're talking about lights, there is in there as well the idea of levushim. And these garments change when it's one garment for the entire thing, or all these garments are part of one garment, or it's like if you have a suit, or you just have a sleeve of a suit. If you just have a sleeve from a suit, or even one article of a uniform. There's so much less over there. If a policeman is only wearing his police cap and he's not wearing the rest of the uniform, how much of his power as a policeman is being expressed with just his hat? But when he wears his entire uniform, his entire thing, then he's much more a policeman or an army man or whatever it is. It's the entire uniform together that captures the entire thing. So it's similar to the idea of vessels, but on a much subtler level. And that's his second explanation on why the light gets reduced when the light gets differentiated. Okay, let's leave that Be'ezus Hashem, the rest for tomorrow.